context is absolutely everything. I'm going to talk here about session plans and finding videos online, but if it's not relative to your players, it's useless. So the context to this is my recent experience of running grassroots education for the Federation. I've done it for a couple of years, and this is something that comes up regularly, which is where should I get my training sessions from? Or I really need help in coaching training sessions better because I just don't know what training sessions to do. I can Google it. It will give me thousands of results. I can go on social media. There are thousands of results. Which one is good? Which one should I use if I'm trying to work on building out of the back because I coach 7v7 and there is the build outline, so we have to do it? Well, which one of these training sessions is going to help me? For example, my website has some of my favorite sessions. They are completely out of context, as is everything else that you're going to find online. And the idea of this episode is to share just the 5 steps that I use and the 5 steps that I recommend for you to be able to identify any training session and be able to use it for your players. There are different methodologies. If you have done a grassroots course, there is the play, practice, play methodology. There are all sorts of club methodologies, or the Barcelona way, or the Fiorentina way. And then we also layer in things like TOVO. There are so many options out there for you to follow. It almost feels like many coaches become disciples of a certain strategy or a certain methodology. I only do TOVO as an example, or I am a play, practice, play. I did a grassroots. I love it. It's valuable for my players. And there's a little bit of context when we start referencing who our players are. So let's get into my top 5. Part 1. I've talked a lot about goal setting. We do a lot of that with our players. But what are the goals for the team over the entire year? This is something that may be determined by your club director. It may be something determined by you, or you may be in an environment where everyone's just playing for a little bit of fun. And so we're kind of an open book as to what we really want to try and achieve this year. I think, assuming we're not working with the oldest players and we're working with younger players, it should always be that they come back. Now, that comeback, of course, can be contextual to maybe winning is important for them and they're super competitive, but they will come back if they have a successful season that they determine successful with wins or with super competitive experience. It may also just be young players who are looking to learn about the game and decide, hey, that was really fun and I want to play again. If they are our top players, are we treating them like top players? Are we treating them like they're getting ready to go off and play in college or beyond that into an academy? Or if we're already in an academy, how are these players being prepared? But that's all part of the goal. The ultimate goal of the year, the ultimate goal of the season. If you play spring and fall or fall and spring, then you should have 2 seasons, 2 core seasons really, where we are setting standards for those seasons. And then we work backwards a little bit more into the cycles. Now your cycle may be just 1 week because you work on practice and then a game, or then game and a practice, and that's one cycle complete because you react to the game. Or maybe you set a 3 to 4 week cycle of working on a consistent topic, and then you set goals to achieve throughout each game, and then your cycle is complete. But all of these goals go into what are the training sessions we are running. And as you go through the coaching licenses here in the US, and I'm assuming anywhere else in the world, there is always going to be this periodization, this planning. What does it look like for us to move through this year, and what should we look like at the end of the season? Or as you'll often hear in the pro game, when are we peaking? Are we peaking at the end of State Cup? Are we peaking at the end of the season when we're going to go and play in this showcase, or we should be winning the league? That is part 1. Part 2. We push the roadmaps, US Soccer roadmaps. You can search this online. Lots of people have reproduced it. But the roadmaps simply outline where our players realistically should be based on their age. And again, this is done by US Soccer. So you may be in a club that has its own roadmaps for the players. And think about a schematic that says at age 9, players should be able to do A through H. And of all of those things, the coach could probably check them off or give them to parents to check off. That's the sort of roadmap example where we are saying our players at 7v7 should be able to do X, Y, and Z. And we should be able to train them in those things. Now, one of the roadmap items for 7v7 players is shoot. Now, the context of shooting, of course, if you think about young players, generally, a pass or a shot is the same technique. Unless you've got a little wonder kid playing on your team, it's generally the same technique. It's the same outcome. Sometimes it goes in the goal. Sometimes it's a pass to a teammate. Then we go up through 9v9 and 11v11. Shoot is still a consistent part of the roadmap for 9v9 and 11v11, but the context changes. 7v7 shot looks a whole lot different to an 11v11 shot. Side note, I scored a goal last night outside of my left foot as I cut across the defender and just simply deflected it into the goal. I'm not tooting my own horn or anything here. It's rare that I score, unfortunately, but I scored. And that shot, which was a shot, it was an intentional, I was trying to score, it didn't look like an accident, even though one of my teammates said so. That shot looks a whole lot different to what one of our players would perform at 7v7 or even 9v9. Yeah, maybe you have that superstar on your team who can do that, but the reality is the overwhelming number of our players are unable to do that. So the context of the roadmap, shooting at 7v7 looks a whole lot different to shooting at 11v11, but importantly, the roadmap for 7v7 expands at 9v9 and then expands again at 11v11. So we recognize we are building a base, which means when I look for a training session plan for building out of the back and it involves a little layoff and the goalkeeper pinging the ball 40 yards out to the right wing because that's what the Bayern Munich training session looked like that you found online with Xabi Alonso, well, unfortunately, your players cannot do that. They won't be able to do that just yet. They can't read the game. It's out of their context. However, your older players may be able to do that, or your players right now will be able to do that in 2 to 3 years if we start layering in some context as to how we can start moving the ball across the field and use little layoffs. So outlining what the roadmaps are aligned with your team and then matching your goals with those roadmaps help keep this realistic for our younger players and for any players. Number 3 is about observation. What makes your players tick? I was recently asked when I was running a grassroots education class, how do you light a fire under your players? How do you make them want to play? Well, the first answer is look at what the definition of a grassroots player is. And what grassroots soccer is. It's played by anyone, anywhere, anytime. That opens the door to all sorts of players that are going to play. First-time players, experienced players. My club in San Francisco, the Vikings, we have walking soccer for over 70s. The game is played in so many ways, and that is what grassroots soccer is. So that's the context of my grassroots coaches that are coming into the classes and working with me. So how do I light a fire under them? And the context comes from a coach who played Division 1 collegiate soccer. So her last experience of playing soccer was this ultra competitive, win-win-win environment. Your college education is on the line. Your school pride is on the line. And now she's coaching her 7-year-old daughter who's out there having a wonderful time, but doesn't have that same fire. So my question was, what was your fire when you were 7 or 8 years old? And of course she didn't know. She could guess that she was having fun. Much like if I say, why do 7 or 8 year olds play? It is because it's fun and they want to have a good time with their friends. So her experience, her context means that what she's trying to implement from her memory, her last memory of playing and playing at that level, then tries to run training sessions that were similar. And now she's got these little girls who don't understand it. They don't care in the same way. But it's still a valid question. How do you light a fire under them? Now, I asked her, who are your players? You told me that they like to have a little bit of fun. They're out there with their friends. So does your training session reflect that? Whatever you decide for your next training session, deliver the rules, deliver how they play, and let them play. And I want you to stand back and watch with a notebook and just ask, is there a fire? Are they pushing hard? Are they performing how you would like them to? And then the next question is why? Is it because I'm trying to challenge them to do something too complex? Is it too confusing? There's lots of cones on the field. There's lots of rules. Or is it just that they're just not into it in the same way that I am? Now, we can help them become into it. For example, if you have super competitive players, adding things like winners and losers in games. And my side note here is reward the winners, don't punish the losers. So for example, we always play winners where you play a 4v4 game, for example. If you score, you get to start with the ball again. If you miss, the other team get the ball. But maybe for our players that we're starting to try and instill this fire and we want to encourage them to shoot, every time you shoot, you still get the ball back and you get to start again. So there is an incentive for our players to go and score, to go and attack, to take these shots because they get the ball again. Why are they at practice? They're at practice to play. Well, when they play, they have the ball. They're having significantly more fun than if they are defending. So what does it look like for your players? And importantly, this is about your players and it's not about you or your desires. If you've done the goal setting and the roadmaps correctly at the beginning of the season, you should be able to align your expectations and your desires with the players because you can push them a little bit. But if you're already 5 levels ahead of them, trying to get them to snap into tackles and win the ball high, etc., well, it's not going to work and you're probably going to leave frustrated and the players are going to be equally frustrated because their experience isn't relative to their needs and what they are looking for. So if they're having fun and they want to play and they're just going to have a good time with their friends, our training session has to reflect that. Does it mean they just get to do cartwheels and hang out and talk and mess around and not really do too much without intensity? No, I don't think that's the case. But there has to be a layering in opportunity of fun. I watch an older girls team train and the first 10 minutes on arrival is social time. And out of a 90-minute session, they actually train for about 70 minutes because they give that social time to the players and recognize it's really important for 15-year-old girls to have that connection. That's context. I'm not going to plan a 90-minute session if I know that my players need 10 to 15 minutes of social time because I think that is way more important than them instantly setting up and playing a 4v2 rondo. So into part 4, combine. And what I mean by combine is you design your own training session. You will find one online. There are 1,000 resources out there to help you either start to define your own within a methodology. You can use US Soccer's grassroots plans for the play, practice, play. You can subscribe to an online course with any coach and buy all of their session plans and their season plans. You can do all of that. But it's always going to be out of context of what we've talked about. The goals of the team, the roadmaps relative to the age of the players, and then, of course, observing what makes your players tick. So if you have to tweak this training session, which I think that you probably have to, maybe you don't have enough players, maybe your space is different, and those are just simple constraints to a training session. But then we also look at the second part that has what are our players going to need in this training exercise for success. If our ultimate goal is building out, and we just watched how Barcelona build out through a pivot number 6 and moving the ball X, Y, and Z, well, does my team have those players? Are they able to do that? Do they understand that type of play? Or do I need to change that a little bit? And I can slowly introduce a number 6 to help us build out and what that means. But that has to be taken into consideration, and that's what we mean by combining. So you might remove a player to make it more simple. You might add a player to make it more complex. You might change the goals, and in the show notes, I'll link to the constraints episode we did where we talked about how different goals change behavior, how different rules in the game change behavior. You want to add a little bit of fire and a little bit of competition? Use a timer. We're going to play for 1 minute. Go. The winners get the ball again at the end. The winners get to decide what color pinnies they wear. The winners get to decide X, Y, and Z. Add a monster if you're working with young ones. Maybe that's a coach. Maybe that's an assistant coach. Maybe that's just a player with a pinny on their head running around. Maybe you need to add a goalkeeper to add some reality for your older players or include goalkeepers. But what you'll see is what you saw online will never look the same on the field. And if we prepare for that ahead of time, now our session is more likely to run with some success. Then we go on to part 5. Do it twice. And I've always said, if it's not working, abandon it, play a game, bring up plan B. Maybe there's a game that your players like. Maybe there's a game that you do all the time that they are familiar with. Perfect. Do it. But do it twice. Do it tonight at training. Leave and reflect, consider, how was it? Was it good? Was it bad? What went well? What didn't go well? Does it match all of those previous points? Did I observe enough? Did I combine enough of my players' goals and the roadmaps to make sure that it's a success? And then I'm going to do it again tomorrow, because now tonight they're going to learn it. There's some nuances, there's some rules. But then tomorrow they go, oh, I know what this training session is. I know what this game is. We played this yesterday. Great. Because I went home and I thought about it, or I shared it with the parents, and now they're talking about it with their players. So when they come back again today, they are now ready to go. If we do this, we give them a chance to have success because they understand the rules of the game. It lightens my load of feeling like I need to plan a training session, a unique training session every night. And it adds just some significant value to me being now able to get out there, do the same thing. We all know what's going on, and I can spend more time observing and then ultimately coaching my players. Just reflect on your last training session. If you spent a long time explaining the rules or telling them they were doing it wrong or right or demanding effort and enthusiasm, just think back here over the 5 aspects. What is the ultimate goal of the year, the season, the cycle? How do the roadmaps align with the goals? How do the roadmaps align with what's going on our training session? Is it relative and appropriate for our players? Are you observing what makes them tick, what makes them push, and what makes them turn up and play every time? And is that factor incorporated in your training session? And then again, now we should be on our second session and watching it come to life. Could you do it 3 or 4 times? Absolutely. Maybe 3 times in a row, it might be a little bit boring. Maybe you change the rules a little bit or add a little bit of context in there, change the constraints. Brilliant. But it's still the same environment for them to continue to play in and not just learn the game.